further ado, allow me to introduce Lesley Kent Baradel. She comes from Georgia as she juggles her husband and three very busy children that keep her active and running around. And she also comes to us with lots of very, very valuable information. She has her MBA, and then she also has her master's in health and fitness. She teaches at Georgia Tech, so she is quite familiar with talking and expressing the importance of nutrition and how it impacts and what it does to our mood, not only to us physically. So I'm really excited to hear this. And she is part of our board of directors for the Team Horner ESOP group. So she's one of us. She's grew up with Team Horner, and we are thrilled to have you and welcome you with open arms, sending you a long distance big hug. So Lesley, take it away.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for the nice introduction. And yes, I did grow up with Team Horner, and I love you guys. So I love being on the board and staying involved in that way, even though I don't work directly with the company. But I always have an opinion on something. So kind of like my dad that way. So I'm going to go on ahead and share my screen. So thanks for coming today. I see that lots of people chimed in, so that's exciting. And we are going to be talking about good food, good mood, and what that means for us. So what we're talking about really today is the gut microbiome and what that means in regards to our health in the areas of our mood. And I will also touch on just the general, what does it mean in other aspects of our health as well. And this is a really cool area of science right now because it's very exciting. They started doing research on it back in, I think it was like 2005, but over the last 10 years, more of the science is coming out now because obviously it takes some time to do testing and things like that before they start seeing results. And it is an emerging science. And one of the interesting things about this particular area is that most of the studies right now are really just done on animals. So there's been a few studies, and there've been short studies done on humans. So we always have to keep that in consideration when we're talking about these sorts of things. So when I'm speaking about something, I might say, this may impact you in this way, or it may impact you in that way, because when there hasn't been a ton of research on humans, sometimes it's hard to say, okay, just because it happened on a mouse or a rat or something like that, that maybe it won't affect humans in the same way. So I always try to keep that stuff in mind when we're talking about new kind of emerging science type of areas, which is what we're talking about today. So our agenda today is we're going to walk through, it's just basically in 3 blocks, and it should take about 20, maybe 30 minutes. It took me, I've recorded this presentation one time, and it was about 30 minutes without any questions. But if we have any questions, please feel free to stop me, or you can ask me at the end. So we're going to talk about first the gut microbiome, so I can explain to you what that actually is. Secondly, I will ask about the gut-brain axis, or we'll explain what the gut-brain axis is, and that's where that emerging science is happening. And then I'll actually switch it over to what's the nutrition kind of lifestyle recommendation that I would give in order to have a healthy gut microbiome. So here we are. So what is the microbiome? So not very exciting. Well, it is exciting, but it's kind of icky to think about, I think, is that our microbiome is basically about 100 trillion microorganisms that live in our gut. And when I refer to the gut, I'm talking about your small intestine and your large intestine, mostly the large intestine, but basically the whole gut area. And these 100 trillion microorganisms or bacteria are all in one person, which I think is just absolutely amazing. To think of you have that many little bacteria in your gut is just crazy. And actually, about 90% of our body's cells are in the gut because of the existence of the microbiome, which again, to me, is a really crazy fact to think about. And another interesting thing about our microbiome is that it really is established, the bulk of it is established by about the age of 2. But that doesn't mean, just because it's established by the age of 2, that doesn't mean we can't influence it as adults. So what determines what is in our gut microbiome? What does it look like, all the different species? And if you, or species of bacteria, and sometimes when you guys are looking at maybe a yogurt, you might see a lactobacillus, or sometimes in the ingredient list, these what they call active ingredients. That's what I'm talking about here today, is those little active ingredients that you might see on your yogurt. So it's determined by 2 things, basically genetics and then the environment. And with the environment, obviously we don't have a lot of control over genetics, but we do have control over our environment. So some of the key things that influence the microbiome in the environment are how we're conceived, whether it be through the birth canal or C-section or cesarean section. And if you were conceived through the birth canal, this is actually, studies show that individuals that were birthed through the birth canal have a healthier microbiome, because when you go through the birth canal, you're basically taking on your mother's microbiome and all the different bacteria that you collect through that process. Breastfeeding can be very influential. Also, exposure to germs as a child. And a lot of people are using so many antibacterial things nowadays that they say that impacts what the gut microbiome. So when my kids were small, they would get a cold and say, "Oh, that's such a bad thing to have a cold." I was like, "No, I want them to get sick. You want them to get sick because that increases their resistance to those sorts of things." Also, in our environment, which is something that we can control all throughout our lives, is our antibiotic use. As you know, if you've taken an antibiotic before, sometimes your doctor may recommend that you increase maybe your yogurt intake or kefir or something like that. Probably yogurt, because that's probably a little bit more mainstream than kefir, because that helps build up your gut microbiome, because the antibiotics will kind of deplete your microbiome and create an imbalance in your microbiome. So that's something to consider as well. And then, of course, there's your nutrition lifestyle, which is what I have it underlined, which is what we're going to focus on today in regards to things in our environment that we can control. And what's interesting about the nutrition lifestyle is studies show that if they research or they analyze the microbiomes of somebody in Africa, where the individuals have a larger percentage of their diet would be grains like rice and things like that, because they're cheaper. They have a different microbiome than folks in the US, because we eat a lot more meat and a lot more protein. So what you eat helps determine what the microbiome looks like. And then, of course, that also helps determine what kind of things you are susceptible for in regards to your health. So what's our gut's microbiome effect on our system? Well, the gut microbiome is very helpful with the synthesis of helpful nutrients, and we'll talk about a few of those here in this presentation. It also can impact our allergies, autoimmune diseases. Research is showing that maybe it impacts our cognitive decline. It can have an impact on obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and also our mood, whether or not we're happy or sad, which is part of what this presentation will focus on today. So as you can see, the microbiome impacts not only your mood, but also so many different areas of your life. Are there any questions? I'm not sure if I can stop for questions, but I forgot to ask that question, but I'll keep going. So the second part of today's agenda is to look at the gut-brain axis and what that is. So this is, of course, emerging science. So in the past, we used to always think there's our little brain up here, and I have the gut down here at the bottom. And we'd always think, okay, well, I have one brain. But now researchers think, you know what, actually, I think we've got two brains. So the first brain is our actual brain in our head. And that, on the left-hand side, that has influence on, the motility of our digestive system, the actual physical things that are happening, the secretion of the different nutrients in our digestive system, nutrient delivery throughout the body, and it also influences the microbiome balance in our microbiome. And then the gut, they're saying now, is like a second brain. And it is actually influencing our neurotransmitters, which we'll talk about today, stress, anxiety, mood, and behavior. So it's like we've got two brains now that are helping us navigate through the world. So right here is sort of the statement that we're going to talk about today, is that the gut flora, and flora is just another term you can use for microbiome if you hear that or individuals talk about that or use that term, that may affect behavior and emotion due to the manufacture and absorption of neurotransmitters by the gut flora. So what do I mean by that? Let's go on the next slide. There we go. So we have some neurotransmitters, and these are just, neurotransmitters are just hormones or proteins that influence, that are, help us send electrical signals throughout in our body that help determine what we do in many different ways. So it's a complicated area, but we don't need to get into all the details. But the three neurotransmitters that we're going to talk about today that impact our mood, and you guys may have heard of them, are going to be serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. These are all really important. So you can see that serotonin over here on the right can impact our obsessions and compulsions, our anxiety, our irritability, our appetite, aggression. Dopamine, you guys have probably heard of that before. Excuse my dog, sorry. And that's a great neurotransmitter, and it helps us with pleasure and reward. Dopamine is one of those things that they study when kids are playing like video games and things like that, and they'll look at the brain and see if they're playing a video game and what's firing in the brain in regards to how they're reacting to the different things that are happening in the brain, and people kind of get addicted to that. So that's where you might have heard that term. And then norepinephrine, which has to do with alertness and concentration and energy. But what do all these things have to do with what we eat? Well, each one of these is basically a bunch of amino acids, and amino acids are the building blocks of a protein. So if you connect a lot of amino acids together, it makes a big long chain, and you get your protein. And then that protein is going to do something in your body. It has lots of different things they can do. But each one of these, the serotonin, the dopamine, and the norepinephrine, are one of the important amino acids that are in them are tryptophan, which is a building block of serotonin, and tyrosine, which is a building block of norepinephrine and dopamine. And these particular amino acids can only be obtained from your diet. So if you don't eat them, you don't have them. So we have some amino acids in our body that the body can make and manufacture itself. But we also have other amino acids that the body doesn't make, and we have to eat them to get them. So these two, tryptophan and tyrosine, are both amino acids that we have to eat in order to have them in our body. And they're important because they are one of the links in many, many different proteins in our body. And if we don't have them, then that protein won't be a complete protein. So that's an important thing. And interestingly enough, another little fun fact is that serotonin up here on the right-hand side, 90% of the serotonin is produced in our gut. And dopamine, I've seen different, I don't really have an exact percentage, it's a large amount, but I've seen a lot of varying ranges on dopamine. So in regards, so I've seen it at, at 50%, I've seen it at 70%, I've seen it at about 80%. So I don't really have an exact number on that one, but consistently through research, serotonin will say about 90% of it is produced in your gut. And then obviously with dopamine, it is a large percentage is produced in your gut. So what you eat is very, very important for the development of all three of these neurotransmitters. And they all impact us on our daily lives all the time. So then what is the nutrition lifestyle recommendation if we think those things are all important? So your nutrition lifestyle, and I don't want to call it a diet, even though later on in the presentation, I do use the word diet just because it's a slide, but I try not to think of diets anymore. The trends in the US, as you'll notice, is really the undiet. People are done with diets. They know that they don't work. It's more about living a whole nutrition lifestyle that includes all different food groups, because our nutrition lifestyle has such a large impact on our energy levels, our mood, obviously, our stress levels, our memory, and our sleep. So it's really important to think about, when you're thinking about nutrition, to think of it as a lifestyle. Even if you're on a quote unquote diet or something like that, think of it as maybe a lifestyle. So for our gut health, I want to, in this nutrition section, I want to walk through what are the foods that are high tryptophan foods, what are the high tyrosine foods, and then walk through general prebiotics and probiotics, which is what you hear a lot about in the news. And what you're going to find is that there's so much overlap between all of these different areas that you'll see that by the end, you'll think, well, maybe I just need to have a really balanced diet. And that's going to help me the most in having the best gut microbiome. So what are some of the top 10 foods highest in tryptophan? So there's 10 areas here, and in each one of these little boxes, you'll see under seeds and nuts, you'll see it says pumpkin and squash seeds. There's a little percentage right next to there, and that little percentage is the percentage of the requirement for the day for each individual person. So if you're going to have some pumpkin seeds, about 20 grams of pumpkin seeds, that's going to give you 58% of the what you would need in tryptophan for that day. And then chia seeds is a little less, sunflower seeds is a little less, and almonds and hazelnuts. So it's ranked according to what's the highest concentration of tryptophan in each of these different foods. And you guys have probably heard of tryptophan before, because sometimes when it's like Thanksgiving, people say, oh my gosh, I'm so sleepy because of the tryptophan. So all these different areas, seeds and nuts, cheese, very important, chicken and turkey, shellfish, beans and lentils, soy-based foods, lamb, pork, beef, game, fish, oats, and eggs. So there are so many areas that you can get tryptophan, and which is a great sign to me, because then that shows you and me that really having a balanced diet, I'm going to get enough of this. So where's tyrosine? And you'll see again, lots of overlap. We've got seaweed, we've got egg whites, meats, poultry, cheese, pumpkin. Again, here comes those nuts and seeds. So, so important. Beans and lentils, avocados. Avocados, I think, are my favorite food. Whole grains, bananas, watermelon, chocolate's in there. So some of you guys out there will be very happy to see that. And then green leafy vegetables and fruits. And one thing I wanted to note on this particular slide is you'll see the second thing on the list says egg white. Now, the reason why it says egg white and it just doesn't say egg is because tyrosine is part of a protein. The egg white, the protein in an egg exists in the egg white. It's pretty much all protein in the egg white. However, I don't want to send the message that eating the yolk is a bad thing. The only reason they have egg white on this particular slide is because they're trying to show you where you would find tyrosine in the egg. But eating the whole egg is awesome. Taking out the egg yolks You eliminate so many wonderful B vitamins and so many wonderful things that exist in that egg yolk that I would never take out the egg yolk. So when you eat an egg, eat the whole egg, because you get so many great nutrients in that egg yolk. And then of course you get the great protein in the egg whites. So those last two slides, those were very specific to the tryptophan and the tyrosine. Those were very specific to looking at what's going to impact our mood through the development of the three neurotransmitters that we discussed. Now, this next slide is more of a general slide of what does research show from a general perspective should individuals eat in order to maintain a healthy gut. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard these terms, probiotics and prebiotics. So the prebiotics are non-living, non-digestible organisms. Basically, those are food for the probiotics. And the probiotics are those little live guys in your yogurt and in our gut. And so they're alive and well and doing what they need to do. But where do we find these things? So we find our prebiotics, which again are the non-living, non-digestible microorganisms. And you find those in cruciferous vegetables. There are so many out there. I mean, I really could have made these lists like forever long, but I wanted to limit it and at least give you guys an idea. You can find them in garlic and onions, asparagus, artichokes, beets, lots of legumes, great whole grains, nuts and seeds, unripe bananas, because when bananas get more ripe, they get more sugary when they get the brown on them. That's why they get a little sweeter. And we use those for like breads and things like that. They always say use really ripe bananas because it makes it sweeter. Apples. And then where do we find our probiotics? And this is what you hear a lot about when you're kind of reading on the internet about how do I, have a healthier gut. So yogurt is a fantastic thing to eat in order to get those live microorganisms. Kefir, also wonderful. So many of you may not know what kefir is, and that is a liquid drink, or it could be used on cereal, and you mix it with milk. If you have cereal in the morning, if you add a little kefir, you barely even know it's in there. It just makes the milk a little thicker. It can be found in all grocery stores. It is always in the dairy section, and it comes in all different sorts of flavors: strawberry, blueberry. I like to try to recommend people not to use the flavors because they usually have any flavored kind of yogurt or kefir usually has a lot of added sugars in it. So if you can get used to eating it plain, that's good too. They also have it in little kid sizes. So if you have a child that maybe doesn't like yogurt, it might be too thick, they don't like the consistency of it, you can get a kefir, which is a drinkable yogurt, and maybe they can drink it. And probiotics are also found in fermented foods like sauerkraut. Sauerkraut was one of my favorite foods as a kid. Pickles, tempeh, michi, miso, kombucha. You guys have probably all seen kombucha. It's all over the place in the stores. Very trendy, hot item right now. Also, the good news is that probiotics are also in aged cheeses like Gouda, mozzarella, cheddar, and cottage cheese. I don't know if I would put that under cheeses. Sorry about that. But cottage cheese is also a place where you can get probiotics. And I actually didn't even realize that until the other day. And I saw it on a list and I looked on my cottage cheese and it does have probiotics in it. So that was exciting. Another source of probiotics that I actually didn't think about. So here's our two lists. So one of the key things that we think about as dietitians is that we don't really want to get focused on any one particular food. And so as you see here, I have identified all these different kind of bigger areas of food, but then each one of them has very specific lists underneath them. And we really want to move away from, if I eat, kale, I'm going to be a superhuman, because we want to look at it from a whole lifestyle. So if I look at all the different kind of lifestyles out there, The one that I feel really is a great lifestyle for maintaining a healthy gut and a healthy gut microbiome is the Mediterranean diet. And this is where I said I should have put a little X through that and put lifestyle. But the Mediterranean diet is basically, here's their little diet pyramid. And as you can see down at the bottom here, it exists of whole grains, bread, beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds, lots of fruits and vegetables, olive oil, fish, dairy, eggs, cheese. So you can see by just looking at this and looking at all the other lists that we just went over, everything, all these lists that we just went over exist here in the right amounts. There's yogurt's kind of up here at the top, and I might even bump that up a little bit to add a little bit more yogurt or kefir, some dairy products, because those are pretty easy to consume. They're easy to get at the stores. And, sometimes people, with the probiotics, some of these fermented foods, they might not be, your kids may not want to eat sauerkraut. They may not like pickles. So sometimes I think the fermented foods are a little harder to come by for the general purpose. At least I know in my household, if I, serve my kids, I don't think they'd like sauerkraut, or they may not like pickles, but yogurt and kefir, those can go over. Those are pretty mainstream, not too extravagant in regards to taste and things like that. So this is what the Mediterranean diet looks like. And so if you're thinking about, how do I maintain a healthy gut? We don't want to focus on any one particular food. We want to focus on lots of different foods so you get lots of color on your plate. And here's what maybe a plate would look like. So you have, look at this, half of the plate is the vegetables. We have a nice portion of protein down here. And then we've got some grains, we've got some fruits, and we've got some water. And I always think I want to create or open a restaurant where your mains, how sometimes I think as Americans that when we think about putting our plates together, we think, what's the meat I'm going to have, or what's the protein, and then what's going to go along with it, versus what I think it should be is, what's my vegetable going to be? Because that's really 50% of my plate. And then what protein am I going to complement that with? What grain am I going to complement that with? Or what fruit am I going to complement that with? So thinking about it in a different way when we're thinking about what we're going to have for dinner. So maybe one day I'll have a restaurant that actually serves food in that manner. So some other helpful tips for a healthy microbiome outside of food, and these are all environmental things that we talked about before, is limit our antibiotics. Because remember I was saying in one of the first slides we discussed that antibiotics can create an imbalance in your microbiome. Getting plenty of rest. So one of the interesting little factoids on rest is that studies actually show that our microbiome has a circadian rhythm just like we do. It sleeps when we sleep. So making sure that your microbiome gets all the proper sleep, just like you need every night to maintain itself and live, because these are live microorganisms in our body. They're alive just like us. So they need rest too. So I thought that was a fun little factoid. Playing in the dirt, as I mentioned before, or at least your kids. I'm not sure anybody here is playing in the dirt anymore. Exercise daily. So the minimum recommendation for exercise is 150 minutes per week. That is very easy to maintain. And that is just basically to maintain, kind of like the bare minimum. But if you can do more, that is awesome. But if you can't do more, you know what? Everybody has a different life they live. You may have 6 kids and you're working, 50 hours a week. I hope you're not working 50 or 60 hours a week. But so it may be a struggle to get that 30 minutes in a day. But if you can, do it several times a day, just to at least get a little bit of something in, that's awesome. And then, of course, eat processed foods in moderation. As you can tell from all the different slides I showed you, everything that I suggested was really whole foods, not in a package. However, I do understand life is busy. So that's why the important words here in this particular bullet are called in moderation. Everything can fit into a healthy diet if it's in moderation. You don't want all processed foods, but sometimes they come in to play as well. And sometimes you can be really smart about the processed foods that you choose in the grocery store. Because especially now, I think the manufacturers are doing or starting to do a much better job at producing foods that have a limited number of ingredients. So if you're smart about how you're shopping with your processed foods, then I think you can do pretty well. Or if you feel like, you can't make every part of the meal every single night, maybe one part of maybe it's your grain might be a little bit more processed than your meat and your vegetable. So you can kind of, in regards to timing and things like that, and how long you have to prepare your meal. So sometimes you have to give and take a little bit on those sorts of things. But overall, our goal with the microbiome is we want diversity and we want lots. We want diversity in our bacteria and we want lots of bacteria in our gut. We want to have 100 trillion or more. And to get diversity, you have to have diversity in your diet. So one of the first things I said on one of the first slides when we were talking about that nutrition lifestyle, I mentioned that individuals, children and adults in Africa have a very different microbiome than individuals in the US because they eat more carbs than we do here in the US. So the diversity of our microbiomes are different. So we want to have a very well-rounded diet so that you get lots of different microbiomes and a healthy, happy microbiome and lots of in high numbers. So I went through that pretty quickly, hopefully. But my last slide is take care of your body. It's the only place that you have to live. So hopefully we have a few questions out there. I think everyone's probably on mute. But that's the end of the presentation. I wanted to open it up to any questions you guys might have, if you have any.
Lesley, that was great. I definitely learned quite a bit. I have the habit of eating some of those things, but I'm definitely going to make it a little bit more regular, for sure, especially knowing all the benefits.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. The research in this area is just, it's unbelievable. And if you think about it, if 90% of your cells are in one particular area in your body, it has to be very impactful. And having the biome or the gut is important in the manufacture and absorption of all of the nutrients that we eat. So if we're not eating great nutrients, then we're not going to absorb great things. So it's really great to eat the great nutrients so that we're absorbing and manufacturing all of the right things.
I don't know if you're able to see the comments. Laura says gardening is how adults play in the dirt.
Good idea. That's true. Picking weeds in my house.
And Aaron, one of our teammates, Aaron Nadelman's asking, is it possible to drink too much kefir?
Too much kefir? That's an interesting question. I think that's going to be something that one would answer on an individualized basis. Some people have, some people have a lactose intolerance, but kefir has very, very low. I think it's like less than 1% of lactose. So that shouldn't be a problem. I mean, you can have too much of everything at some level. I mean, you could have too much broccoli at some level. That could create some real digestive issues. So I think the only thing that you would be concerned about there would be potential digestive issues with that type of food. But I think you would have that really with any food. And that's why I'm always saying, everything in moderation. But if you had a kefir a day or a cup or 2 cups of kefir a day, I can't imagine that would be that would not be harmful in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. Unless, of course, you had an intolerance to something in the kefir.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right.
I didn't know. Question.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Kim. Thank you, Lesley. That was fabulous. My mom and I are here and we said, boy, we've been missing out on the pumpkin seeds. We're going to need to get some of those. Also, but I have a question. I have some friends who are dairy-free, and is that an issue, do you think, for their gut? Is there something they can do instead of using the dairy or the kefir that they could supplement their diet with?
Well, it depends on why they're dairy free. If they're dairy free because of lactose, kefir is going to be so bare minimum on lactose that it shouldn't be impactful for them. But what I would suggest that if they were interested in using kefir, that they just slowly but surely, like try like a half a cup, and then see how that feels and how that goes. And then obviously if that works, then they can increase it a little bit more. The other thing too is in the dairy-free section, there are so many wonderful other options outside of even kefir. They've got so many different quote unquote yogurts that they make nowadays. And what they do is they will, because they are in direct competition with yogurt, which naturally, it's a fermented food, so it naturally has all these bacteria, they will what's the right word? I'm going to insert these bacteria into those products as well, because they're trying to compete with yogurt and get to as close to the same nutritional profile as yogurt would be, because people use those things as substitutes. So you could look at the different options that they're already using to see if there's already some microorganisms in the particular products they're already using.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Well, I found it interesting that pickles have probiotics. I mean, I'm like a pickle fiend.
Oh, good.
To a certain extent, because I know that they say that like a woman should only have probably like one pickle a day because it has so much cholesterol. But yeah, at least I'm getting my probiotics through that. Yeah.
I don't think pickles. Well, pickles wouldn't really have any fat in them, so I'd be curious about I've never looked at the nutrition profile of a pickle, but I wouldn't think it has cholesterol in it.
I don't know if it's actually cholesterol, but I know that there's one thing that for a woman you should have.
It might be sodium.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sodium.
I knew one of those too, but I know that I didn't realize that it had like live probiotics in it, so I find that pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to thank you for giving us additional reasons to make change. It's like you're able to see how your nutrition impacts you externally, but not always internally.
Right.
So thank you for that. Definitely some changes to be
Yeah.
made in the
Yeah,
near future.
Definitely.
And the thing is that you can find them in so many great foods. So it's not like you're really searching at or having to do anything kind of strange or like eating kind of weird things. And also, there's always people get so focused on one particular food as a superfood that they need to be really eating a ton of, and we never want to do that, because foods need to be eaten in moderation. They all provide great things, and if you eliminate one, like a lot of people eliminate carbs and things like that, but they have great B vitamins in them. Those are our energy vitamins. Those are great things, and that's what our brain needs, those things. The primary source of energy for our brain is glucose, which comes most easily from a carbohydrate. And so people kind of get focused on eliminating things and things like that. Everything can fit into a wholesome diet. So if there's one thing that you guys left here with today, that would be my hope, is that, variety and moderation on everything.
Yeah, definitely. They're easy changes and changes. So that's wonderful.
Well, one thing that I had noticed about the list that you had, I guess it was for the probiotics with the pickles and the kombucha and all that. So a lot of those items seem to have vinegar. So is it really the vinegar that's helping you the most, or the food itself?
It's the fermentation process that creates the bacteria, but I'm sure the vinegar, to be honest, I really don't know the answer to that question. But I'll look actually afterwards, if you look at the fermentation process, but I'm sure the vinegar has something to do with it in some respects, but I don't know the exact answer to that question.
So salt and vinegar chips?
Yeah. The salt, I eat a lot of salt and vinegar chips.
Any kind of chip is okay,
Yeah.
right?
That's right. Hey, I just mentioned carbohydrates are good, right? I mean, so that fits in there.
Moderation.
In moderation, yeah.
So there is a question, if you're lactose sensitive, is it okay to eat cottage cheese?
Yes, but in small amounts. You would have to test it, you know, so I would be careful on the cottage cheese. Yeah. But there's so many, lactose intolerance is such a great, I mean, so many companies have made so many substitutions for lactose intolerant individuals now. So definitely you won't be lacking, but you might like cottage cheese. So that's kind of a bummer if you like cottage cheese.
All right, Lesley. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really learned a lot, clearly. And if nobody else has any other questions, I think it's safe to sign off.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Lesley.
That was awesome.
Appreciate you having me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon. All right. Thank you all. See you next time on the HornerBuzz
Live.